This story is titled, During Our Divorce, when my ex-wife mockingly claimed I would crash without her while taking half my company's assets, I silently retreated, knowing my revenge plan was already in motion. Months later, my phone showed 67 missed calls from her desperate attempts to reach me. Hey everyone, I'm Tom, a 31-year-old carpenter who's seen the rise and fall of both a business and a marriage. My journey in home renovation started long before I knew what life had in store for me. I spent 8 dedicated years learning under an old master carpenter named Dave. This guy was an absolute legend in the Sacramento area. He could eyeball measurements better than any digital tool on the market. Dave was tough as hell and would tear my work apart if it wasn't perfect. But that's exactly why I got so damn good at my craft. After those 8 years of intense training and hard work, I finally built enough of a reputation to start my own renovation company. I started small, just me and my beat-up Ford truck, with a garage full of tools I'd collected over the years. My first jobs were basic, deck repairs and custom shelving, but I put my whole heart into every single project I took on. Word started spreading fast throughout the neighborhood, and I soon began getting calls for bigger and better jobs, kitchen renovations, bathroom remodels, and even custom built-ins for wealthy clients' homes. The business wasn't huge by any means, but it was honest work that I took pride in. I was making good money, enough to be comfortable, and had 2 reliable part-time guys helping me with bigger projects. I was even starting to think about getting an actual workshop instead of working out of my cramped garage. Life was going pretty sweet back then, being my own boss, doing what I loved, and making an honest living with my own 2 hands. Then she walked into my life and everything changed. I met her at a home improvement expo where I had set up a small booth to showcase my work. She came by asking about custom cabinets for her condo. I'm not going to lie, she was absolutely stunning. Her name was Olivia, and damn if she wasn't perfect in every way. She was smart as hell too, with this way of talking that made you want to listen to every word. As we chatted, I found out she worked in corporate communications for some big company downtown. After I finished her cabinets, which she absolutely loved, we started dating, and things moved pretty fast between us. That's when she wouldn't shut up about all these amazing ideas she had for my business. She kept talking about scaling up my humble operation, her exact words, and would say things like, "You're wasting your potential," and "You could be the biggest custom renovation company in Northern California." After we dated for a while, she convinced me to let her handle the business side of things. "You should focus on what you're actually good at," she told me repeatedly, building high-end custom kitchens and bathrooms. At first, she just helped part-time with paperwork and scheduling, which was a relief since I'd always hated the administrative side of running a business. Then she quit her fancy downtown job to work full-time for my business. She redesigned everything from top to bottom. New logo, fancy website, started running social media campaigns. Like an absolute idiot, I put her name on the business when we got married. We'd been together just over a year, but I thought we were partners in life, so why not in business too? Looking back now, that was mistake number 1. I should have seen all the red flags waving in my face. She was always talking about our future in terms of money and status, never about happiness or building a life together. But I was head over heels for her, and felt good having someone believe in my skills that much. We moved into a bigger house in a nice neighborhood. I hired more full-time guys for the crew, and we rebranded with some upscale name to attract high-end clients. Money was rolling in, so I just went along with everything. The first couple years of marriage were decent enough. We worked hard during the week, went out to fancy restaurants on weekends, and took these expensive vacations to places I never thought I'd see. But looking back now, I can see all the cracks that were forming. She'd get absolutely livid if I wanted to take smaller jobs, especially for longtime customers who couldn't afford our new rates. She started pushing me to work faster and take on more projects. Quality became less important than quantity, which went against everything I believed in as a craftsman. She started hanging out with this crowd from Crystal Lake Country Club, where a lot of our new clients were members. I felt completely out of place there, a bunch of pretentious folks who treated contractors like servants. But she fit right in like she was born for it. By year 3 of our marriage, we were technically successful. I had a team of 7 guys working under me, a portfolio full of high-end projects, and more business than we could handle. But I was working 70-hour weeks, constantly stressing about impossible deadlines, and spending less time doing the detailed carpentry work I loved. Instead, I was just managing workers and putting out fires, all because we were stretched way too thin. Meanwhile, Olivia became the face of the company. She handled all client meetings herself, doing estimates that were usually way too low for the work involved, and making promises I had to kill myself to keep. I started to feel like an employee in my own damn company. When I'd raise concerns about taking on too much work or compromising on quality, she'd just dismiss me instantly. "This is how you grow a real business," she'd say with that condescending tone. "You need to think bigger." I still remember the exact day I realized things were really going sideways. One of my oldest clients, a retired history teacher named Mr. Wilson, a guy I'd built a deck for when I first started out, called asking if I could build a custom bookcase for his home office. Nothing fancy, but he was on a fixed income. I told him I'd do it at cost because he'd referred so many people to me over the years. When Olivia found out, she completely lost it. She called me an absolute idiot for working for free and said we weren't running a charity. That's when it really hit me. We weren't on the same page anymore. For her, business was all about status and money. For me, it had always been about craftsmanship and relationships. But by then, we were so entangled financially, legally, and personally that I couldn't see any way out. So I kept my head down and focused on the work, trying to maintain my standards while meeting her crazy expectations. I have to admit, business got even better with her running the show. We started making serious money with her handling clients while I focused on my craft. We took on bigger projects, including a custom library in some mansion, the kind of work I'd always dreamed of doing. Our company Instagram was blowing up with before and after pics, and we even got featured in some fancy home magazine. On paper, everything looked perfect. We moved into an even nicer house, one of those neighborhoods with an HOA. God, I hate those places, but whatever, it made her happy. She got herself a brand new Range Rover, and I upgraded all the work trucks. We were saving decent money too, with our business account healthier than ever. But I was working my ass off, pulling 80-hour weeks with back-to-back jobs. Quality started slipping, and it ate at me inside. I would stay after hours fixing mistakes because my name was still on that business, and I refused to deliver subpar work. Meanwhile, Olivia was spending more and more time working with clients. She'd come home late from business dinners, always dressed up like she was going to a photo shoot, wearing expensive perfume I'd never seen before. We started fighting more about everything. About the business, about money, about where things were heading. When I tried talking to her about it, she'd say I was being insecure, that all this socializing was necessary for business. Like a complete dumbass, I believed her. I mean, our client list was growing. These were the kind of high-end customers who could afford top dollar, so I kept my mouth shut and focused on the jobs, trying to maintain my standards while keeping up with her increasingly insane schedule. There was this one client in particular, some hotshot real estate developer with new money. Let's call him Nathan. He bought this massive house on Silver Lake and wanted a complete renovation. Custom everything, money no object. The kind of dream project that comes along once in a career. Olivia was especially eager to land this contract, kept saying it could lead to developing entire communities if we impressed him. We got the job, and suddenly she was spending tons of time with this guy. Site visits, material selections, progress meetings. I was too busy managing the actual work to pay much attention. The job was complex as hell. Custom kitchen with imported materials, handcrafted built-ins throughout the house, and a wine cellar with this intricate racking system I designed myself. It was actually pretty awesome work. Despite the insane timeline, I was proud of what we were creating. Nathan was always hanging around the job site when I was there, asking questions, watching me work, making suggestions that would have ruined the design if I'd actually followed them. I just thought he was one of those clients who wants to micromanage everything. Annoying but not unusual with these types. What did seem weird was how he and Olivia would sometimes disappear for material consultations that took hours. Then one day she rushes out for some emergency client meeting right in the middle of dinner, claiming Nathan was having an issue with the master bath design that couldn't wait until morning. She was so frazzled she left her tablet on the kitchen counter. I wasn't snooping or anything, I swear. But a message notification popped up on the screen as I was loading the dishwasher. It was from Nathan himself, and holy shit, it wasn't about bathroom tiles. I still remember every word of that message. Explicit details about their afternoon together at his lake house guest cottage, plans for their next hookup, how he couldn't wait to taste her again, how she was so much more exciting than his boring wife. It felt like I'd been kicked in the chest by a horse. At first, I thought maybe I was misunderstanding something. Maybe it was some kind of joke or mix-up. I picked up the tablet and scrolled through their message history. Yeah, she'd been sleeping with this dude for months right under my nose while I was busting my ass building his dream house. There were messages going back at least 6 months, with pictures I wish I could unsee. I stayed up all night just sitting at the kitchen table with that tablet, reading through their conversations. They talked about me too. How I was so clueless, so focused on getting the wood grain just right that I had no idea what was happening. How I was a skilled craftsman but had no vision for the bigger picture. How she deserved someone who could give her the lifestyle she wanted. When she came home around 2 a.m., I was still sitting there with the tablet. She saw me, saw what I was looking at, and her face just changed. Not embarrassed or ashamed, just cold and calculating, like she was already figuring out her next move. When I confronted her, she didn't even try to lie about it. She just looked me dead in the eyes and said, "He can give me what you can't. A real lifestyle, not just sawdust and mortgage payments." That cut deep. I'd given everything to our marriage and the business, worked myself to the bone building something I thought we both believed in. And all along, she'd been sleeping with a client, making plans to leave me once she squeezed everything she could out of my skills and reputation. I asked her if she ever actually loved me, or if I was just a stepping stone to the kind of lifestyle she wanted. She just shrugged and said, "Does it matter now?" That night, I packed a bag and went to stay at my buddy Chris's place. I couldn't stand to be in the same house as her. I called my lawyer first thing in the morning and told him to start divorce proceedings immediately. I was done. What really messed me up wasn't even the cheating, as painful as that was. It was realizing that the business I'd built from nothing, the reputation I'd spent years establishing, was just a means to an end for her. Something she could use to network her way into the social circle she wanted. And now that she had her foot in the door with Nathan, she didn't need me anymore. For a couple weeks, I was a complete wreck, sleeping on Chris's couch, not showing up to job sites. But it didn't take long for me to snap out of it. Screw her and everything she did. She had no idea what she lost. I pulled myself together enough to meet with my lawyer and figure out my next steps. That's when I realized just how deep in trouble I really was. Turns out she'd been planning this for a while. My lawyer told me she'd been setting things up so she'd come out of our divorce with as much as possible. Putting her name on the business was just the beginning of my mistakes. She'd been positioning herself as the brains behind our success, making sure clients saw her as their primary contact, keeping detailed records of every improvement she'd made to my struggling little operation. I'd been so focused on the work itself, on maintaining my standards and reputation, that I hadn't noticed how systematically she'd been setting me up to fall. And now, I was facing the fight of my life just to keep what was rightfully mine. The divorce was a total shit show from day one. I thought having clear evidence of her cheating would make things straightforward. Boy, was I wrong. Turns out in our state, infidelity doesn't mean jack when it comes to dividing assets. The judge couldn't care less that she was sleeping with our biggest client. All they cared about was who contributed what to the marital property, which included my business. My lawyer warned me right off the bat that things weren't looking great. "She's been setting this up for a while," he told me after reviewing our financials. All those client contracts were in both our names. The business account had both signatures, and she had records of all the marketing strategies she implemented and revenue increases that followed. On paper, it looked like she took my small operation and turned it into a successful company. I tried to explain that clients came to us because of my craftsmanship, my reputation for quality work, my years of experience. The fancy website and social media just got us noticed. The actual skills that earned us those contracts were all mine. But apparently, courts don't see it that way. Her lawyer was this slick guy named Anderson, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first truck. The kind of guy who looks down his nose at manual laborers like me. From our first meeting, he treated me like I was some clueless idiot who got lucky, while Olivia was the business genius who deserved the credit for our success. They came in with a PowerPoint presentation showing revenue before and after she joined the business. There were graphs and charts with dramatic upward trends, testimonials from clients about how professional and responsive she was, and photos of her at networking events bringing in new business. It was the whole dog and pony show, making me look like I was just the muscle while she was the brains of the operation. When my lawyer presented evidence of how I'd built the business from nothing before she came along, her lawyer simply argued that it was a small-scale operation until her strategic vision transformed it into a legitimate enterprise. He even had the balls to suggest that without her marketing expertise, I'd still be working out of a garage doing odd jobs for neighbors. Meanwhile, she played her part perfectly. She dressed conservatively, spoke professionally, and presented herself as this hard-working business partner who was blindsided by my emotional reaction to her indiscretion. She made it sound like the cheating was a one-time mistake that I was blowing out of proportion to punish her professionally. The worst part was watching clients I'd worked with for years testify on her behalf. People whose homes I'd poured my sweat into, creating custom pieces they claimed to love, now saying things like, "Oh, we always dealt with Olivia directly, and she was so helpful in guiding our design choices." Like I was just some interchangeable worker bee following orders, not the skilled craftsman who actually made their visions reality. Our business books didn't help my case either. She'd been smart about it, making sure every email to clients came from her, every invoice had her signature, and every contract listed her as the primary contact. On paper, it looked like she handled everything important while I just swung a hammer. After weeks of back and forth, my lawyer pulled me aside after a particularly rough day in court. "Look, I need to be honest with you," he said gravely. "This isn't going well. She's positioned herself as the client relationship manager, the business developer, the brand builder. Fighting will drain your resources with uncertain results. My recommendation is to settle. Settle and give her half my business." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Half is better than nothing," he said grimly. "And right now, nothing is a real possibility. The judge is buying her narrative. If we keep fighting, you could end up with mounting legal fees and lose majority control of the company." So against every instinct screaming in my head, I agreed to settle. The terms were brutal. She got 50% ownership of my business that I started before I even knew she existed. The business I'd built with my own two hands, client by client, project by project. Now she owned half of it, despite contributing nothing to its foundation. The day we finalized everything in court was one of the worst of my life. Sitting there signing away half of everything I'd worked for, while she sat across from me with this smug look of satisfaction. I wanted to flip the table and tell the judge exactly what kind of manipulative, gold-digging snake she really was, but I kept my cool, barely. As we walked out of the courtroom, she couldn't help herself. She had to get in one last dig. "You'll never make it without me," she said, laughing just loud enough for me to hear. Anderson nodded like the yes man he was, adding, "Just a matter of time before you fail." I said nothing, just walked away. But inside, I was already planning my next move. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd broken me. What they didn't know was that I'm not the kind of guy who gives up easily, especially when it comes to business. Those first few weeks after the divorce were rough, not going to lie. I was living in a small apartment, sleeping on a mattress on the floor because she got to keep most of our furniture. I'd go to the workshop every day, trying to focus on the projects we still had ongoing. But it was hard with her constantly hovering, checking in, and questioning my decisions about materials and techniques I'd been mastering since before she could tell a jigsaw from a circular saw. The guys on my crew could tell something was off. They'd worked with me for years, knew my standards and methods. Now, suddenly, there was this tension, this awkward dynamic where she was acting like the boss, countermanding my instructions, and rushing timelines. A couple of them pulled me aside to ask what the hell was going on. I just told them the business was restructuring and to bear with me. What really stung was seeing her parading around with Nathan at client events, now not even trying to hide their relationship. They'd show up together to check on the progress of his house renovation, which I was still working on because professional pride wouldn't let me abandon a project midway, even for them. They'd whisper and laugh while I was installing cabinets or trimming outdoors. The disrespect was unreal. One day I overheard him asking her when she was going to get rid of the carpenter so they could take the business to the next level. That's when it clicked. They weren't just planning to push me out of my own company. They were planning to transform it into something completely different, something with his money behind it, her face on it, and none of my craftsmanship or values involved. That night I sat in my crappy apartment weighing my options. Fighting in court? Pointless. Buying her out? Not happening. Walking away? Hell no. This was my business, my reputation, my work. I wasn't letting her take that too. Then it hit me. I didn't need to fight for control. I just had to let her crash and burn while I built something better, something that was mine, and definitely no Nathan's money involved. I couldn't compete directly. The divorce settlement had specific language about that. But there were other ways to use my skills, other services I could offer that wouldn't technically violate our agreement. I just had to be careful, methodical, and patient. As I started sketching out my plan, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the divorce. Hope. And underneath that hope, a grim satisfaction at the thought of what was coming. She thought she'd won everything. She had no idea what was about to hit her. I slept soundly that night, dreaming of the look on her face when she realized she took half of a business she was about to run into the ground, while I built something new and better right under her nose. Then, a week after the divorce was finalized, she calls me up acting all businesslike, saying we need to have a strategy meeting to discuss the company's future, like we're just normal business partners or something. She tells me to come to Nathan's fancy penthouse downtown. Yeah, the same client she'd been sleeping with behind my back. The audacity of these people, I swear. I considered telling her to go screw herself, but my lawyer advised me to play nice for now. Don't give her ammunition to claim you're not fulfilling your obligations to the business, he warned. So I put on my least shitty clothes and drove my work truck to this luxury high-rise, feeling completely out of place among all the BMWs and Mercedes in the parking garage. The penthouse was exactly what you'd expect. Floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the whole city, modern art that probably cost more than my annual salary, and furniture that looked expensive but uncomfortable as hell. She answered the door wearing designer clothes I'd never seen before. Hair and makeup perfect, like she was heading to a photo shoot instead of a business meeting. Gold digger. Nathan lounged on the couch, barely acknowledging me with a dismissive nod, like I was the help. This was the same guy who had been hanging around my job site under the pretense of admiring my work, all while scoping out my wife. She had a full-on presentation ready, printouts, a whiteboard, the whole deal, laying out her vision for the company. According to her grand plan, I'd handle all the renovation work and crew management while she took over client communication, marketing, and finances. We'd split profits after her 15% management fee. Oh, and I'd need to drop everything for her priority clients, aka Nathan and his rich buddies, no matter what my schedule looked like. These premium clients expect white glove service, she said, like I was too dumb to understand customer service. She did that on purpose, that fake condescending tone that always pissed me off. They need to feel like our top priority, even if it means adjusting other projects. Translation. Her new boyfriend's friends cut the line while our loyal clients get screwed. Meanwhile, Nathan sat across the room grinning like an idiot, tossing in lines like, "Quality craftsmen are hard to find, but good business leadership is what separates success from mediocrity." AKA, I was just the hands, and she was the genius. I sat there quietly, letting them lay out this whole plan for my company. They had projections for expanding into multiple cities, hiring teams of carpenters who would work under my supervision, but never interact directly with clients, and eventually opening a showroom in the fancy part of town. Nathan mentioned he had investment capital ready to help scale the business, in exchange for a percentage, of course. They'd already picked out a new company name, new logo, new everything, completely erasing any trace of the business I'd built from the ground up. It was clear they'd been planning this takeover for months, probably while she was still pretending to be my loving wife. When they finally finished their little presentation, they both looked at me expectantly, like I should be grateful for this opportunity, like they were doing me a favor by letting me continue working in my own company. "I'll have my attorney review any new policies," I said, keeping my cool despite wanting to flip their fancy glass coffee table. Her face got all hard, that fake smile disappearing in an instant. "Don't make this difficult," she snapped. "You need me, remember. Without my client relationships, you're just a guy with tools in a garage." That night, driving home to my empty apartment, I made my decision. I wasn't going to fight her in court again. That was a losing battle with her smooth-talking lawyer and stack of misleading evidence. I wasn't going to sabotage the business either. Too many good guys on my crew depended on those paychecks. No. I was going to outsmart her by building something she couldn't touch, right under her nose. So the next morning, I personally called every single client we'd ever had. I started with the ones from before she joined the business, but worked my way through the entire client list. I didn't trash talk her or mention the divorce, just said I was checking in on their satisfaction with past projects and wanted to maintain a direct relationship for any future work. Most of them actually appreciated the personal touch. Turns out people like talking to the person who's actually going to be building their stuff, not just a slick salesperson. During these calls, I'd casually mention, "By the way, if you ever need any small repairs or custom pieces done quickly, I sometimes take on freelance jobs on weekends. Nothing that would interfere with our company's work, of course, but if you need something special," I'd leave it hanging, but most people got the message. I ran the idea past my lawyer. What if I did freelance carpentry on the side while staying with the company? He checked the settlement. You can't start a competing business or poach clients, he explained, but nothing stops you from taking small, independent jobs as long as they don't overlap with the company's core services. So if the company does full renovations and you stick to small custom pieces or repairs, that could work. Just keep records in case she tries to twist it into a violation. That weekend, I started quietly picking up freelance jobs. I'd always loved doing small-scale, detailed carpentry work, but the main business had moved toward bigger renovations under her direction. There was a niche market for custom furniture pieces, built-ins for awkward spaces, and restoration of damaged woodwork that the company wasn't really serving anymore. I also took a part-time teaching gig at the community college, teaching basic woodworking on Tuesday nights. This served two purposes: extra cash that wasn't tied to the business, and connections with a bunch of homeowners who needed custom carpentry work done but couldn't afford the premium prices at our main company. Plus, it was actually pretty rewarding, passing on skills to people who genuinely wanted to learn. Meanwhile, I was still showing up at the main business every day, doing the work, managing the crew. I made sure to document everything: my hours, the quality of my work, every client interaction. I knew she was looking for any excuse to claim I wasn't fulfilling my obligations, so I became the model employee. Always on time, always professional, never complaining about the increasingly unreasonable deadlines or the way she'd undercut my authority with the crew. What she didn't know was that my side hustle was growing steadily. I was building a reputation for high-quality custom work at fair prices, spread entirely by word of mouth. I was careful to only work with clients who weren't actively doing business with the main company, focusing on smaller jobs the company wouldn't bother with anyway. The guys on my crew noticed something was up. I was suddenly less stressed despite the increasingly toxic work environment. One night after work, my foreman Pete asked me straight up what was going on. "You've got something on the side, don't you?" he said, not accusingly, just curious. I neither confirmed nor denied, just shrugged. "Just focusing on the parts of the job I can control," he nodded, understanding perfectly well. "Whatever you're doing, it's working. And if you ever need an extra pair of hands on a weekend..." He left it hanging, and I appreciated the silent offer of support. By month 2, I had steady freelance work on evenings and weekends. Not huge, but enough to build a financial cushion outside the main business. Was I exhausted? Yeah. But it felt good to work on my own terms, without her hovering, rushing, or cutting corners. My community college students turned out to be a bonus. Homeowners learning DIY who often needed help on projects that were beyond their skill level. That meant more small jobs, more experience, and more people knowing my name. Meanwhile, my ex was busy running our original business into the ground at record speed. She hired some construction management graduate with a fancy degree, but barely any hands-on experience to replace me as the lead carpenter. This kid couldn't tell oak from pine without a label, but had a degree and talked a good game, which was apparently all she cared about. She rebranded with some pretentious new name, jacked up all the prices by like 40%, and rented an expensive showroom in the bougie part of town where Nathan and his friends hung out. The showroom was a complete waste of money, all glass and chrome, with little samples of materials and fancy 3D renderings of projects, but nothing actually showing the craftsmanship that had built our reputation in the first place. She also hired this interior designer to create concept boards and had professional photos taken for a new catalog. Meanwhile, the actual workshop, where the real work happened, was being neglected. Nathan invested a ton of money in the expansion, throwing cash around like it was nothing. They got a fancy new company van with the new logo, bought a bunch of new equipment we didn't really need, and hired 2 more office staff to handle the increased demand they were so sure was coming. They were spending money like the contracts were already signed, when in reality, they were just burning through the company's reserves and Nathan's investment. Then, the call started about 2 months later, right on schedule. First, she demanded I train her new carpenter and his team. She wanted me to teach this kid everything I'd learned over 15+ years in the trade in like 2 weeks. I refused, pointing out that wasn't part of our agreement, and I had my own projects to manage. She lost her shit, started threatening to take action for breach of contract. My lawyer assured me I was under no obligation to train my own replacement, so I stood my ground. Then came the quality complaints. Turns out her fancy degree-holding carpenter was all theory and no practice. Clients were calling about cabinet doors that didn't close properly, trim that wasn't mitered correctly, and finishes that were uneven or bubbling. Instead of addressing the actual problems, she tried to blame me, claiming I was withholding critical information about our processes, as if the basics of quality carpentry were some secret recipe I was refusing to share. Then came threats of legal action when I remained uninvolved in fixing their fuck-ups. I got an official-looking letter from her lawyer claiming I was deliberately sabotaging the business by not stepping in to solve problems created by her incompetent team. "You're deliberately sabotaging the business," she accused during one particularly heated phone call. "I'm not involved in your business decisions," I replied calmly, enjoying how much that pissed her off. "Our business," she corrected, her voice getting all high and tight like it did when she was really mad. "Your name is still on it, so clients expect your quality." "Then perhaps you shouldn't have pushed me out," I said, hanging up before she could respond. Problems started piling up fast after that. Her team of inexperienced carpenters couldn't match my quality, no matter how many YouTube tutorials they watched. Clients were bitching about shoddy workmanship, cabinets that weren't square, doors that stuck, drawers that didn't slide properly. All the little details that separate professional work from amateur hour. They'd also expanded too quickly without the skilled labor to fulfill projects. She'd signed contracts for 3 major renovations, all scheduled to run simultaneously, not understanding that you can't just throw bodies at skilled carpentry work and expect quality results. They were missing deadlines left and right, which meant penalty clauses were kicking in, eating into their already thin margins. My sister Bella, who shared some social connections with Olivia, was my spy on the inside. She'd report back after country club events or charity fundraisers where my ex and her crowd hung out. "She's telling everyone you're being difficult and sabotaging the business," my sister told me over beers one night. "But her friends have seen the new work. They know it's not the same quality. One client showed me photos of her new built-ins, and honestly, it looks like something from a DIY weekend project, not professional work." That made me feel slightly better, knowing that people could see the difference. My reputation for quality hadn't been completely destroyed by association with her shoddy operation. Meanwhile, my freelance work was growing steadily, completely under her radar. I partnered with local interior designers who appreciated my attention to detail, worked with real estate agents staging high-end homes for sale, and built a reputation for quality and reliability, all while still technically showing up at the main business, just enough to keep her off my back legally. 4 months after the divorce, I got an unexpected text from Olivia's mother. We'd always gotten along well. She was a practical, no-nonsense woman who I suspected had seen through her daughter's bullshit long before I did. She'd been disappointed in her daughter's behavior during the divorce, but had stayed mostly neutral. "She's running the business into the ground," the text read. 3 negative reviews online this month, and they're having cash flow problems. Thought you should know." I appreciated the intel, but wasn't surprised. You can't maintain a reputation for quality while cutting corners and rushing work. And you can't stay profitable while bleeding money on unnecessary expenses like fancy showrooms and overpaid, underqualified staff. Then something awesome happened. Clients who'd hired my ex's business started coming to me on the side to fix their poorly done renovations. It started with a guy who'd been a loyal customer for years. He'd gone ahead with a built-in entertainment center project that had been in the planning stages before the divorce, assuming the quality would be the same. When the final product turned out looking like something from a big box store rather than custom work, he called me directly. "Look, I know things are complicated with the business," he said awkwardly, "but this just isn't up to your usual standards. Can you come take a look? I'll pay whatever your freelance rate is." I went over that weekend and was horrified by what I saw. Uneven stain, visible screws where there should have been plugs, gaps in the joinery you could stick a credit card through. I ended up rebuilding half the unit, and the client was so grateful he referred me to several friends who'd had similar experiences. One of those referrals turned out to be a retired contractor who'd hired the company for a bathroom renovation. He became particularly valuable. After I fixed his botched tile work and shower installation, he could immediately see the difference in quality and craftsmanship, and he knew exactly who to blame for the shoddy original work. He referred me to several colleagues, and each time I showed up to fix something her team had screwed up, my reputation grew while hers crumbled. 5 months post-divorce, my ex's lawyer called mine. "My client would like to discuss a buyout," he said. "She's willing to sell her share of the original business." This was the first sign that she was desperate. The business must be failing even faster than I'd anticipated if she was already looking for an exit strategy. But I wasn't about to make it easy for her. My lawyer asked for the terms, and when he called me back with them, I actually laughed out loud. She wanted twice the business's current value, as if it hadn't tanked under her management. She wanted me to take over all outstanding debts, which my lawyer estimated were substantial. And she wanted me to sign a non-compete preventing me from working with any of her clients for 5 years, which would kill my growing freelance business. Tell them I decline, I told my lawyer, but keep the door open for future negotiations. I knew things would only get worse for her, and I could afford to wait. 2 weeks later, everything crashed. The company missed payroll, half the crew quit, projects stalled, clients threatened lawsuits, and suppliers demanded payment. Nathan, once eager to invest, suddenly backed off when real money was needed. Turns out impressing my ex was fun, but his accountant wasn't about to fund a sinking ship. I just kept growing my freelance work and documenting every failure. She'd come crawling back eventually. I just had to be ready. Call it petty. Call it karma. She tried to steal what I built without understanding the craft behind it. Now she was learning the hard way that you can't fake quality and you can't run a business on bullshit. And the best part of it all is that I hadn't broken a single rule. I still showed up for work, still met my legal obligations, just biding my time while her empire crumbled. Then one day she showed up at a job site unannounced, all done up in designer clothes and perfect makeup, but she looked tired and stressed. "We need to talk," she said nervously. "The business is struggling." "I'm aware," I replied, continuing my work without looking up. "You need to be more involved. Clients are asking for you specifically. I show up when scheduled. The rest isn't my problem." "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're being petty. We both know you're just doing this to get back at me." "I'm doing this because you took half of something I built and then expected me to work for you. What exactly did you think would happen?" She left in tears. That night my phone wouldn't stop blowing up with her calls, which I ignored. The next day, Nathan called, wanting to talk like men. I didn't want to see his face. I mean, who was he anyway? But I went out of curiosity. When we met, he slid a folder across the table containing a new buyout proposal, this time at fair market value, which was way less than what the business had been worth before the divorce. "Why would I buy back half of a struggling business?" I asked. He looked surprised. "Because it's your legacy, your name. My craftsmanship is my legacy," I replied firmly. "Not some failing company." He leaned forward, dropping the act. "Listen, she's impossible to deal with. The business is losing money like crazy. Clients are leaving and she blames everyone but herself. I can't keep funding this." "That sounds like a problem between you and your partner," I said, standing up. "I'm not interested in the buyout." Soon I found out she'd been trying to catch me doing side jobs, claiming I was illegally competing with our joint business. One homeowner who'd hired me to build custom built-ins was upset after receiving an aggressive call. "She said I could be pulled into a lawsuit for hiring you," she told me worriedly. That was the last straw. I had my attorney send a cease and desist letter. She actually filed a lawsuit, claiming I'd violated our partnership by doing freelance work. My attorney was prepared, with documentation showing my freelance carpentry was within my rights, testimonials from clients who'd come to me to fix her shoddy work, and evidence of her mismanagement. The judge dismissed her case quickly and ordered her to pay my legal fees. A couple months later, exactly as I predicted, the business collapsed completely. They couldn't pay their bills, the carpenters quit after not being paid, and multiple clients had lawsuits pending over unfinished or defective renovations. My ex and Nathan broke up amid mutual blame about whose fault the failure was. He withdrew his financial support, leaving her with a mountain of business debt. The expensive showroom stood empty, with eviction notices posted. The day after I heard the news, she appeared at my door. "Please," she begged, eyes red from crying. "I've lost everything. The business, my relationship, my condo. I need help." I looked at her for a long moment. "You were right about one thing," I finally said. "I couldn't make it without you. I made it much better." I closed the door and went back to work. She had to declare bankruptcy, both for the business and personally, since she'd guaranteed several loans. A year after the divorce, my freelance work had grown into a full-time operation. I don't have a fancy showroom or a marketing team, just me, my skills, and a reputation for honest quality work that spreads by word of mouth. I hired 2 full-time apprentices from my community college class who showed real talent. That's also where I met my current girlfriend, Lauren. She was taking the woodworking class as a hobby. Turns out she's an accountant by day who loves DIY projects. We hit it off immediately when she asked a million questions about proper joinery techniques. Unlike my ex, she appreciates craftsmanship and the value of doing things right. We've been together 8 months now and just found out we're expecting our first kid. Wild, man. Never thought I'd get another shot at the family thing, but here we are. She's already talking about how our kid is going to have the coolest handmade crib in town. Last I heard, my ex moved to another state, trying to escape her reputation. She's working as a sales associate at a high-end home improvement store, ironically selling mass-produced cabinets that merely imitate the craftsmanship she once had access to. Sometimes I think about what she said in the courtroom that day. "You'll never make it without me." She was absolutely wrong. I didn't just make it. I rebuilt something better right under her nose, something authentic, built on craftsmanship and integrity rather than appearances and promises. As for her empire built on lies and shortcuts, it crumbled just as fast as it rose, proving what I'd always believed. There are no shortcuts to quality, and no substitute for integrity. To answer some questions that people might have, yes, this is 100% true. No, I'm not going to share my freelance business info, don't want to dox myself. And yes, I'm much happier now with my pregnant girlfriend without that toxic relationship dragging me down. I've learned a lot through this whole experience. The most important lesson is to be careful who you trust with your business and your heart. In both cases, I was too quick to hand over control to someone who didn't share my values. I was so blinded by what I thought was love that I missed all the warning signs. Her focus on status and money over quality and relationships, her dismissal of the clients who had supported me from the beginning, and her constant pushing to expand faster than we could maintain our standards. There's nothing wrong with growing a business, but it has to be done the right way, with the right foundation. You can't fake craftsmanship, and you can't build a lasting reputation on shortcuts and fancy marketing. Eventually, the truth comes out in the quality of the work. I'm rebuilding now the right way. My new business doesn't have a fancy name or a showroom, but it does have something much more valuable: integrity and genuine skill. I'm teaching my apprentices the same way Dave taught me, with patience, attention to detail, and no acceptance of anything less than your best work. It feels good to be passing on those values to the next generation of craftsmen. Lauren understands what I'm trying to build in a way Olivia never did. She appreciates the beauty in the details, the perfectly mitered corners, the hand-rubbed finish that brings out the grain of the wood, the joints that will hold strong for decades. She sees value in things that last, not just things that look impressive in photos. When I think about our child coming into the world, I'm excited to create not just a beautiful crib, but furniture that will last through their childhood, maybe even be passed down to their own kids someday. That's what real success looks like to me, creating something of lasting value, something honest and solid. The irony of Olivia now selling mass-produced imitations of custom work isn't lost on me. I hope maybe she's learned something through all this too, though I doubt it. Some people are so focused on appearances and status that they never appreciate the substance underneath. As for me, I've never been more content with where I am. My business is growing steadily, built on word-of-mouth recommendations from satisfied clients. I've got a partner who shares my values and a baby on the way, and I've got my self-respect, which is something no court settlement could ever take away. If anyone's going through something similar, whether it's a business partner or spouse who doesn't appreciate your work or understand your values, all I can say is, stay true to what you believe in. There are no shortcuts in quality work or quality relationships. And sometimes losing what you thought you wanted opens the door to finding what you actually need.